Hello and welcome back. In our last segment, we looked at some of the developments that influenced the eventual decision to make the right to education a fundamental right. But the story of how the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act of 2009 was actualized and how it conferred a formal right to claim education provides actually a very interesting glimpse into the contentious nature of policy making. Remember that the 86th Constitution Amendment Act had been passed in December 2002 and it had introduced a new Article 21A, the right to education, as a part of Article 21 or the right to life. Now this new article said that the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state may by law determine. Now this is a very interesting way in which to phrase it. What are the three things that the Constitution Amendment Act says? One, the state shall provide free and compulsory education. Two, to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years, not below 14 years as it was in the directive principle of state policy. And three, in such manner as the state may by law determine. So these are three very important components of that sentence. First, the first component places the obligation on the state to provide free and compulsory education, not on anybody else, the state. The second component restricts the age of children who will receive such free and compulsory education to the ages of 6 to 14. But the third is the most important one. Unlike fundamental rights, the other fundamental rights in the Constitution, which are absolute, this fundamental right says it shall be provided in such manner as the state may by law determine, which means that subsequent to amending the Constitution through the Constitution 86th Amendment Act of 2002, the government now needed to bring forward a legislative act that would give force, that would empower the article of the Constitution itself. This is a fairly unusual situation. So clearly, because of the third component, there was a need for a separate legislation that would implement and govern the manner in which free and compulsory education would be provided. Now the first draft for this was created by the Ministry of HRD sometime in 2003. However, there was a change of government subsequently, and the new government revived the Central Advisory Body Board of Education, also known as the CABE, which comprises of education ministers from the states, eminent academics, the Minister for Human Resource Development at the center, representatives from NCRT, NEPA, schools and so on, to consider various aspects of education policy. And having revived the CABE, the government set up a subcommittee under the CABE and mandated it to draft what it called the essential provisions of a Right to Education Act. The CABE committee then identified a certain number of people to constitute a subcommittee under the chairmanship of Professor A.K. Sharma, a former director of NCRT, to draft the essential provisions. But this subcommittee had two NGO activists, two academics, a representative from the National University or from the National Institute for Educational Planning and Administration, NEPA, intermittent members from NCRT and from other ministries that were concerned, like the Social Justice and Empowerment Ministry, Tribal Affairs Ministry, and so on, and two officials from the Ministry of Human Resource Development. The subcommittee did not have any representation from either the teachers' unions or from the private school sector, both of whom represent significant stakeholders in any such legislation. In fact, they weren't even members of the CABE committee, but two representatives were co-opted to attend as special invitees. So in this at least, I think the constitution of the committee itself was perhaps flawed. Initially, the plan was for the draft created by the subcommittee to be open to public responses through the internet by being placed on the website of the ministry, to have a number of consultation workshops and so on. But because of paucity of time, that didn't actually happen. So the final version of the draft Right to Education Bill of 2005 was put together in the Ministry of HRD on the basis of the essential provisions that had been suggested by the CABE subcommittee. And it was this, not the CABE subcommittee's draft or the CABE committee's draft, that was later put up on the department's website for public feedback. As far as I know, we didn't get a single response from the public via the website in those days. It's also worth noting that the report of the CABE committee was not endorsed by the larger CABE in its meeting in July 2005 because many members of the committee ended up disagreeing publicly with the report that was eventually produced. But yet, this was the draft on the basis of which the final act was passed in 2009. When the bill was introduced into Parliament, it was referred to the Standing Committee. And the Standing Committee, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Human Resource Development, was actually given a 30-day deadline to table its report. This is unusual because standing committees do not normally get deadlines. However, the committee met 3 times but did not obtain evidence from members of the public, although a number of written representations were received. When the final version of the bill was introduced, it did not take into account the recommendations of the Standing Committee. And in the Rajya Sabha, it was passed by a total of 54 members of Parliament present and attending. The Lok Sabha was no better because only 113 members were actually present when the bill was put to vote. For what might be considered fairly landmark and significant legislation in the education sector in India, it's interesting that very limited interest or importance was attached to it in Parliament. There have been multiple critiques of the bill